Okay, I think we can start now. It's 1 minute past 2. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Dear participants, welcome to this session on water scarcity risks for the private sector, especially focusing on the industry. At our virtual table, we have 5 speakers, all involved in this topic in their respective companies. We have Veteral Dagamudi, Global Water Lead for Kimberly-Clark. We have Hans-Ulrich Buchholz, responsible for environmental compliance, water, wastewater, and biodiversity at L'Oréal. Jan-Willem Vosmeer, who's the Global Manager of Sustainable Development and Stakeholder Engagement at the Heineken Company. And we have Maeve Hall, leading Unilever's water program within the global manufacturing operations. We will also hear the perspective from a young professional, Nikita van Velzen, from the Erasmus University of Rotterdam, and presently an intern at Achmea Investment Management. My name is Sophie Vermoten, and I will moderate the session. I'm myself a hydrogeologist at the Research Institute Deltares for almost 20 years now, and since about 5 years also involved in the topic of water stewardship for companies. In this session, I will interview the different speakers. We will not share any slides. It will be a conversation between each other. And in the last part, we have reserved some time for your questions, questions from the audience. Depending on how much questions there are, we will need to select a few. But however, the other ones will be able to respond to later on. If you want to ask a question related to the content of the session, you can use the Q&A button on the right side. My colleague Hans Aldering, who is visible now, will moderate that at the end of the session. But now let's go to the content. I guess we're all very much aware of the challenges ahead when it comes to using our freshwater resources in a sustainable way. These challenges are different depending on where you are on the world, how the water is used, but also who is using the water. But also these challenges will develop differently in the future in relation to socio-economic developments, but also in relation to climate change. When looking specifically at how private sector is using their water in the production of goods, they're responding to these challenges in different ways. You could say there's this quite broad, wide bandwidth of responses. There are companies that are only reacting when water scarcity hits them. There are companies looking at water only at their factory level. And there are companies which I could call more advanced in their water stewardship. They're looking at the health of the water basin they're located in, or at the way water is used in their supply chain. And this is, I guess, far from easy, as we all know that water is very context specific. The value of water is indeed different depending on where you are in the world, but also who the user is. But now let's hear some examples from those more advanced companies. And I will start with my first question, which I will ask to Veteral Dagamudi. So Vetri, what is the vision of your company on how to deal with water-related risks in the near future, 10 years? Do you focus, for example, collective action or on the value chain, or do you have a regional approach, or do you have more kind of sectoral approach?
First, thank you, Sophie, for the opportunity to speak in this panel. I think the question is on all, right? Everything that you just talked about. So in Kimberly-Clark is just for a background, we're going to be hitting 150 years next year, and roughly a quarter of our world's population use our products. So water is an essential part of our manufacturing process, the products that we make. And at the same time, we bring essentials to our people, so by bringing their daily products. So I think in terms of water risk, in our journey, we realized that, the first risk is definitely operational, because you want to make sure that you have water available for productions and manufacturing process. But we also realize that water is very important for the consumers and the stakeholders that live around those basins. So our strategy falls into making sure that we have, right knowledge about the water availability, making sure everybody around the situation has the water. So we definitely think about collective action, because you could be in a basin where you could reduce 100% of the water use. We'll still be at risk if our neighbors are not doing anything. So either you win it all or you lose it all together. So it is very important for us to kind of drive that collective action, sharing best practices, and really working on improving the basin health, right? That's where the biggest impact is. At the same time, there's a supply chain that you talked about. Supply chain is an area where there are a lot of our suppliers who make products. How do we know that? So those are all our strategies that we are looking into it. Our goal is to reduce our water footprint by 50% reduction by 2015 as a baseline. And these are the other topic you talk about, regional approach, right? Water is a global problem, but it is a very local issue. Each local basin has its own sets of risk. So we need to understand what is the specific risk in that particular basin, and you need to solve for that. Just quantity reduction is not the solution. There could be quality, there could be flooding, biodiversity, multiple different types of risk. So our approach is kind of really driving a global strategy, but really applying a local lens to it, right? So that's where the key is. So it kind of is a hybrid of regional and a global, because one treatment doesn't fit one location to another location. Yeah, I'll pass it on to my other co-speakers so they can talk about it.
Thank you, Vetri. I would like to give the word to Hans Ulrich. Could you share a bit on the vision of L'Oréal?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Sophie, for this invitation and to give me the opportunity to contribute to this roundtable. Water risk, because you asked about how to manage water risk. Water risk is linked to water dependency. So our business in the cosmetic industry, we are very depending on water at every stage of the life cycle of our products, for the production of the raw materials, for the manufacturing side, and for the use of our products by the consumer, for example, for rinse-out products. So our vision for the next years is to reduce a maximum this dependency and to go further for a local positive impact. To do that, we have to change radically our business to develop products that are not harmful for the environment, that are easy to rinse out, that are less water consuming. We have to change our manufacturing processes to reduce locally less water. We have to work on the consumer use phase, how to motivate how the consumer is using less water. And we started with our footprint. Rachel talked about footprint in quantity and quality, and we identified the hotspots. Where are the main footprints that we have? In quantity, it's more raw material and use phase. In quality, it's more the end of life. And for all these hotspots, I will do in the life cycle of a product, we set ambition targets at the horizon of 2030. You were asked about the next 10 years. So, for example, for the suppliers, that 100% of our strategic suppliers use water in a sustainable way where they operate. So there are two things: sustainable water use, that means quantity, quality, and where they operate, it's the context. And this we want to have for 100% of the suppliers. And we have targets for the manufacturing sites and also for the consumer, to enable consumers so to need less water to rinse out our products. And so what we want to do is to activate all our ecosystem around us, and to collaborate with suppliers, with consumers, and with brands to improve, to reduce dependency, and to reduce the pressure on natural water resources.
Okay,
that's for me.
Yeah, thank you. Jan Willem, you want to elaborate on the vision of Heineken?
Yeah, sure. And Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. I hope you have a good conference so far. Yeah, Heineken is of course a worldwide company. We are almost there for 160 years, so close to Kimberly-Clark, and it says something about the longevity of these companies. We have operations in over 70 markets, over 170 breweries. So water indeed is a very important topic for us, because it's not only a shared resource, it's also a very important ingredient for our products. 95% of beer is water, and we use, of course, water also to grow our crops. So water already is for a long time on our agenda. It's not talking about water, but the big thing, I think the big shift here is, and it was also mentioned by the other speakers, is that at the beginning the focus was very much on efficiency, but we are now using more and more holistic approach. And we already started to do that by 2010, and we continue to do that moving forward to 2030. And we launched that holistic approach in 2019. It's called Every Drop, where at the heart of our strategy is not necessarily our own efficiency, but really supporting healthy watersheds. And that's specifically important where there is water stress. So really looking beyond our own operations only. And we have a triangle for that, where we, of course, continue to increase our efficiency in production, but also 100% treat all our wastewater. And what we do with the wastewater, making sure that we maximize reuse and recycling of that wastewater, because then you can continue to reduce the pressure on water use. And beyond the fence, really balancing all the water that we use in our products in water stressed areas. We want to bring it back through replenishment projects. That could be nature-based solution, but it could also be infrastructure reparation. And of course, you have the collective actions, already mentioned. Collective action, incredibly important, because that's where you really can make an impact with other users. We talked about a little bit about water footprint. Indeed, we also use water to grow our crops, mainly barley. Now, that's mostly rain-fed, so we don't need to irrigate it in most of the times. So we are at a lower scale water use there, but it's hugely important that we use water wisely in agriculture. And I believe it will grow in importance for the coming decade. So absolutely, also our focus on that part as well.
Thank you, Jan-Willem. Well, Maeve, your turn. You want to say something about the position or the vision of Unilever?
Yeah, of course. And again, thank you for having me at this session and allowing us to contribute to the dialogue in this space. I guess one of the things is, like, I'm going to kind of repeat what everyone else is saying, really, but I guess this is a good sign in terms of that we're all, like, moving in the same direction. So Unilever, we've recently celebrated our 125th birthday party. We've got around 2.5 billion consumers all around the world that use our products on a daily basis, making everything from ice cream to laundry powders. And we need water to grow our products, to use our products, and to make our products. So water insecurity affects our business right across the value chain. It represents a huge risk for us, which is why you'll see that it's included in our annual report of accounts. But we also see that there's big opportunities from addressing water insecurity, both from a market development, market protection, and addressing a white space. In 2020, we launched our new Unilever Compass, which is an integrated sustainable business strategy. So it's not business growth or sustainability, it's growth through sustainability. And this is really to help us deliver superior performance and drive sustainable, responsible growth. And then when we look at our water strategy, it's a little bit similar to everyone else's, but we think about it like in terms of an onion. So there's different layers. So our core is our products and our direct operations, so what we've got direct responsibility over. And here we're taking action to transition all our home care and beauty and personal care products to be fully biodegradable by 2030. And whilst we're well on the way to delivering that, there's some challenging materials in the tail end of some of those products. And then in our direct operation, really increasing water efficiency increasing water recycling, and then applying new targets around water stewardship to really address the water-related risks around 100 of our manufacturing sites. To do that, we're applying the Alliance for Water Stewardship standard, and so this really builds off of our historical water efficiency program and looks at how do we take relevant action in relevant places that is meaningful. And so that research and engagement really helps us to understand what it is that's really needed in those places. So that's our core. And then if we think about our next level, which is our supply chain, this is our agricultural supply chain mainly. We're driving water efficiency and looking at soil protection and minimizing use of fertilizer and things like that through our sustainable agricultural code and regenerative agricultural codes. And then the next layer is really our brands and the brand purpose and how we can communicate with our consumers to address issues. And then wider than that is our wider ecosystem and how we work with others like 2030 Water Resources Group or the Alliance for Water Stewardship, Sanitation for All, Toilet Board, etc., in terms of really trying to transform the wider ecosystem to mobilize change. So that's a little bit like so it's a holistic water strategy that was kind of built up in layers, I think, similar to everyone else's.
Yeah, thank you, Maeve. I think it's what you said is good to hear that there are similarities, because it makes it easier to do collective actions in basins where you're all operating if you're operating the same basin. Thank you for that. I would like to go to the next question, and I will ask Vetri again to respond first. My next question would be, how do you deal with the fact that the value of water is different? In the different regions, you have factories, meaning how do you deal with the different contexts? Whether we talk about the hydrological context, but also the socio-economical context.
Oh, that's a fantastic question, right? It's probably the most important thing to solve a water problem. So I think that the way Kimberly-Clark look at it is in two folds of it. From an operational perspective, what we look at is what we call total water management program that looks at the way water quality plays a role on production manufacturing process. So we actually do a complete end-to-end approach of site assessment. We map all the processes. We actually are looking into not just a quantity like pH and like a quantity and pH and stuff. We actually get much more deeper into ionic mass balances. We look at what are specific contaminants that could cause increase in chemical usage or increase in energy usage. So using that principle, we're applying almost a new cost of water, because it's not historically we just look at wastewater cost and just freshwater cost, but this now is integrated to the overall production. So that helps us to kind of drive more efficiency and more adaptation of newer technology, which gives us a good business economical sense, right? We do get cost savings out of it, because now we can, with the water quality, you can now start to say you can make more with less materials, right? That drives a bigger sustainable and also cost perspective. And on the outside the fence level, it's quite difficult, right? It's just a lot of data, a lot of stakeholders. So we've used tools like WRI Aqueduct and WW Risk Filter. And we also been the founding members of the Water Loop tool that allows us to kind of assess the local social economic scenarios and climate change scenarios to understand what is the specific risk in terms of water scarcity, how it actually looks in terms of the next 10, 20 years. That allows us to understand the gaps. And in the process, we also identifying stakeholders that are responsible to drive those collective actions. So in that case, it actually puts us on the collective action footprint. We're now using science to engage with stakeholders, not emotion-based. So I would say an emotional-based discussion is different than a science-based discussion is different. So using the tool, we're able to kind of now assess and understand, and we're actually done in quite a few locations so far. And again, a lot of my peers were talking, this panel, we've been talking about how can we all work together. So I think it's a collective action and a collective goal. No one can solve it alone. Maybe on the operational side, we can now share all our practices. So that's how we look at it, right? So it's hopefully in the future, we all have one goal in a basin, that not our site level, but all of us share one particular basin level goal to drive that impact.
Thank you, Vetri. Hans, Ulrich, yeah.
You're on mute, Hans.
Most said sentence in the last month. You are mute. So you asked the question about the value of water in different contexts. And mainly the value of water is the highest where the price is the lowest. So economic and water reduction is not really an indicator to focus on actions. So what we are doing is Vitriel talked about that, screening with the existing tools about water availability. And already there are different parameters, different tools, different results. So we combine the screenings for our suppliers. So we are doing screening of the production units of our suppliers and of our own, for sure. And we cross this with information, local information about infrastructure and experiences of the local teams. And just an example, if you take Mexico City and you apply tools, you have 3 different results. And if you go deep on the ground at site level, you can see in some department they have water and the others they don't. So it's really important to understand the local context and not to rely on tools that we have today. We will talk perhaps afterwards about that. And there is another point that is very important, how efficient is an action and how fast I can realize it, because we have no time to lose. We have the decade to act, and it's really, we have also to decide what is the fastest and most efficient that we can realize now. And not where we need methodologies to develop 10 years and then perhaps we can do it now. And so the one criteria is really how fast we can implement it and what is the efficiency of this for the business and for the local context. That's for me.
Thank you so much, Hans, for this answer. I think that's a very good point about speeding things up.
Yeah.
Jan-Willem, you want to share your answer to this question?
Sure. Indeed, I completely agree that water is indeed very local compared to the carbon agenda. Having a great solution in Mexico won't solve the problem for example, in Indonesia. So this means you need to look at it from a case-by-case basis, and there are really not one single solution for all. Which means, in the end, that you need to do a good and in-depth risk assessment in these water-stressed areas. And of course, there are data available, but sometimes you also will find out there are no data available or maybe not up to date. So you need to really put your effort in that to get a clear picture. But also very important is to have conversations with stakeholders that are important for that watershed. That could be on the national and the regional, local level, but also communities who are dependent on it. And this can be done in very different ways. In one country, we do this in a close cooperation with the university. In quite some other places, we've worked with UNIDO, which is the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, to set up multi-day, 3-day, multi-stakeholder conversations where we actually invited 30 stakeholders to follow a 3-day workshop and really to give everyone the same opportunity to give their input on the local water situation. And then the outcomes are actually being the risks and also the measures that could be taken to decrease the water risk and to increase water security. It could be related to the quantity of water. It could be related to quality or accessibility. Many times it's a combination of that. So, for instance, access to water could be an important issue, but sometimes we find out that there's a lot of erosion and that could cause floodings. So on the basis of this, taking actions, you can take actions or you start to think about actions that will help support the health of the watersheds and contribute to nature, communities, and businesses. And preferably you do that with other stakeholders, other businesses, other governments, because you cannot make the impact yourself. Now, if I look at the moment today, 19 out of the 30 sites that are located in water-stressed areas, and we do this risk assessments at least once every 5 years for all the production sites. They now have watershed protection programs in place. Quite some of them already are fully balanced or even water positive in that sense. Ranging from nature-based solutions to infrastructure improvement, with ultimately the aim to be fully balanced or fully balance our water usage in production by 2030. And in the meantime, also addressing risks in the supply chain, working with farmers, most of the time through intermediaries like in Mexico and Egypt, to help reducing them to use the water in growing the crops, especially where they need to irrigate the crops.
Okay, thank you, Jan Willem. Now I would like to hand over to Maeve. Want to ask a question? Yeah,
sure. Again, really interesting going last on this, because although we've got like very similar strategies, everyone looks like they're doing it quite differently, which is maybe an opportunity for us going forward. So for us, how we value water differently in different places. I mean, if we just look at what we've been doing the last 10 years, where we've really driven a water efficiency project, we've really tried to prioritize action in water stressed areas. So this has been done through a central fund where we've allocated not an increased, we haven't allocated a shadow price on water. What we've done is instead allowed for extended paybacks for those operating in water stressed areas. And we manage this centrally, and we support the sites in water stressed areas to kind of help them to drive performance improvements. We've also got a really strong network of SHE professionals across the world that really understand the local issues and help to elevate increasing risks to the leadership. I'd say the CDP water disclosures really helped this as well, in terms of bringing additional focus, but also really drilling down into the specific issues being faced by specific sites in specific catchments. So that's been really helpful. As I said, with the new strategy going forward, we're implementing we're applying the Alliance Water Stewardship Standard to our operations. And this really helps us to get that deep dive into the river basin risks and challenges, and supports us with taking appropriate action. So and this helps, and this then helps us to build this into our not just water stewardship approach, but also to our location-based climate resilience strategies as well.
Okay, thank you, Maeve. It's good to hear that you're all really looking at the context of water. I think that's also in the past years I've heard worries that water would be indeed looked at the same way as greenhouse emissions, which is actually should be looked at a total different way. Just to make things a bit more concrete, I have a third question to ask you with respect to water stewardship, which is if you could share one best practice to illustrate what you have been sharing with us until now. So yeah, maybe you want to share a lot, but I will really like to ask you to pick one to share with the audience. So again, sorry, Maeve, but I will ask Patrick to start.
Okay. All right. So I think so if I have to pick a good best practice, maybe I'll start in terms of our operational efficiency side of it, because that's critical, right? There's historically we've done things in the same way, and most times you're risk averse, you don't want to adapt new technology. So I think one of the things we start thinking about a wastewater plant is about applying a circular mindset. How do we actually apply? What could you get more value out of water before it's being used? You pump it out from there, you use it for process, and you discharge it. So one of the projects that we looked into is that a site that's located in high water stress region. We're actually working to understand all the water risk assessments around it. So as I told about total water management approach, we start to look in terms of what specific water quality does. So we apply these what we call as a ionic mass balances. That's basically looking at scenario-based modeling. So we look at, here's the water comes in, here's a list of different unit operations across the end-to-end. Then we look through the ionic mass balances, and we then start to say, if I reuse the water, in this case, which location gets more concentrated or more contamination? And then what is that direct connection with productivity, right? So we're now applying, how does a paper making process connect with water quality? For example, hardness. What does hardness do to energy use to like a chemical use? So we learned that process, we implemented that, and then we're running iterations. And that allows us to now come up with a new cost of water, that is a cost per ton. And now we start to look at, okay, if we have a conventional old technology, that may not be able to be enough for us to have us reuse the water even more, right? That helps us to identify newer technology. So we start looking at membrane bioreactors or reverse osmosis, or even an anaerobic reactor type of things, because we have wastewater that comes out, which has a high organic content. So now this modeling also helps us to kind of identify, we actually put an anaerobic reactor where we're now actually are mining that high organic content by using smaller footprint, and actually are taking the energy. So we actually offset 10% of the site's natural gas use. Now, then apply that water, it's a smaller footprint. Now we say, hey, we can go to the aerobic MBR process and RO treatment. That allowed us to reduce 40% of the water reduction at the site level from the baseline in 2015. At the same time, it's delivering high cost savings, because now we have much better water quality than what we take from the fresh water, from our own wastewater. So this allows us to kind of bring efficiency in mindset, changing our mindset. One is adaptation, so adapting new technology. That's a critical piece in value. Mindsets and behavior changes. We do diagnostic approach. At the end, we're going to reduce the water we take in a particular basin, so that water becomes available for the local stakeholders, right? And with our water loop journey, where we're going to go up there, that's going to help us to now drive that collective action reduction. So it's just the way that we're looking at is combining efficiency and optimization and connecting that to stewardship. So we talked a lot about value for water, but we think value and values for water. There's a value you bring to the business, and doing that value you now apply to make sure that your community gets the values out of it. So that's the best practice, is one of the approaches at how we actually get projects. And we have done multiple of those projects, and we got a few more coming in the pipeline.
Okay, thank you, Vetri, for sharing this example. Hans, what would be the best practice that you would like to share with the audience? Oh, you're on mute.
So I would like to talk about our water loop concept. It's with double O, the water loop. And since a long time, we were working on water efficiency in our factories. We are reducing our water needs. We are reusing water that we cannot reduce. But there was a critical point where we could not reduce the water consumption anymore. And our target was in the former sustainable program to reduce about 60% water consumption in factories. And total water consumption, that means if you take into account the water that goes into the product, it was about 80% for utilities. So it was a tough target, and there was a critical point where we could not optimize. So we sought to find other water sources, and as we heard before, we identified our wastewater, and we started to recycle. And we adapted best of the art technologies and perhaps if you can talk about innovation, the use of these technologies was innovative, but not the technologies itself. It was all available. And we started to recycle. We had a lot of good experiences. And so we used about 50% of the water consumption. But we wanted to go further, and we developed the concept of water loop. That means a factory that has the internal label water loop has the right to use potable water only for the use of water for the employees and as a raw material. And all other water has to be reduced or recycled in the loop. And there are two things. We wanted to show that water has a certain value and that we want to use water only where it's essential. And it's not essential for industrial processes because we can recycle water, we can reuse water. So we developed this concept, this internal label, and today we have 6 factories that are already running for that. And when in our new sustainable program, L'Oréal for the Future, the target is that all our 40 factories will run with this concept, water loop. And this is a contribution to the water security because it reduces strongly our dependency. Our collaborator, and in the communication, we can communicate that water has a value for us. We are focused on water stressed regions. And so it's like a project, and there are different types. And perhaps only one sentence to a second best practice, because I think it's important to show that we work also on technical developments on the consumer side. And we had collaboration with the startup Gyoza, and we developed a water saver. It's an equipment that allows hairdressers to reduce up to 80% the consumption of water, to rinse out products and to wash the hair. And this is a collaboration between the R&I that produces the formula to be easy to rinse out, and the manufacturing that developed an equipment with the startup. And this shows that we talked about collaboration. Collaboration is everywhere and has to be everywhere. With different type of industries, we can learn from chemical industry, we can learn from agriculture, from all. And for this, I wanted to inject also this second example. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. I think it will be remembered, the story about the hairdressers, I'm sure. Jan-Willem, which best practice would you like to share?
Yeah, I would like to share a practice on nature-based solutions. It is something that is being talked about quite a lot, also on the upcoming COP26, which has started today in Glasgow, because nature can help us in many ways. Not only if we take care of nature, we can capture water better in the ground, but it can also help us to capture carbon, for instance. And one practice I would like to highlight is a practice in Spain, where we wanted to balance all the water coming from the local brewery, and we entered a partnership with the local government, together with an NGO called Common Land. It's a Dutch NGO, to actually restore lagoons in the wetlands of Doñana. And Doñana is a very important area for migrating birds from Africa to Europe. It's an incredibly important natural reserve, but also very much under water stress, because there's a lot of agriculture going on in that area. So quite some of the lagoons were becoming dry, and actually we worked together with the partners to restore part of the lagoons by improving the soil structure and water filtration. And in the end, we brought life back to these wetlands, because we not only increased the level of water again in these lagoons, but also it made the birds coming back. So it improved hydrological function and brought the birds back, which means an improvement in biodiversity. And this wetland restoration is also being replicated at another site in Spain, which includes the removal of water-intensive species or alien species, because those were destabilizing the riverbank and also impacting natural habitats. Now, it's always important to measure the impact, and also to measure whether you are really water balanced or becoming water positive in a way that it is, let me say, bringing back or replenishing back more water than you actually include in your product. So for this and also for other water balancing projects, we work with universities and an external agency called Limnotech to measure and review the outcome and the impact. It's called the volumetric water benefit accounting method. It's a bit of a difficult word, but it has been developed by the World Resources Institute. You see that there is a lot of developments going on measurement and impact measurement. It is an ongoing area, but it's important to measure that. And to finally, I think the balancing water and is of course our own target, but I think the collective action part is important. So where you can upscale these kind of actions to work with other partners, maybe to increase the scale, that is actually most preferable, because then you can really make an impact. And one of, for instance, in Indonesia, one of the outcomes of those stakeholder consultations I just mentioned with UNIDO was actually to set up a local water alliance in 2017. Our local business, Multi Bintang, was involved in that. And that is now being scaled up and is being transformed into a national alliance. And if I'm correct, also L'Oréal is part of that. So you see that these partners and businesses are growing together, where they are sharing the same water basin or the same watershed, but still a lot to do there.
Thank you so much, Jan-Willem. Also a very concrete example that can inspire other companies dealing with the same kind of challenges. Maeve, what would you like to share with us?
Wow, I mean, I feel like I've been trumped because Vetri and Hans have already talked about the water recycling, and now Jan-Willem about the nature-based solution. So let me talk about, I'm going to use this as a bit of a call to action as well. So we, in terms of the water stewardship program, we've got great experience in India, but we're very much on the starting the journey in terms of our global operations. So maybe I could use this to just illustrate some differences that we're seeing as we're trying to implement this in different places. So we've been working on this for the last year with 12 sites in 4 locations, and kind of 2 really stand out, like very different examples. Indonesia, where we're actually working with Heineken and Multi Bintang and L'Oréal, and hopefully Vetri is going to join us soon in terms of the setting up a water coalition there run by TNC and Alliance for Water Stewardship, really bringing in different partners together to talk about different issues and identify areas for driving collective action. So that's an example of where kind of we've been able to mobilize, been part of a group mobilizing change with different sectors, all trying to address change in the kind of the river basins feeding Jakarta, like the big population hub of Jakarta. But when I look at like how we're working in another area, so in Konya, Turkey, anyone on the call who is operating in this area, please get in touch. There's no existing platform set up or other big multinationals operating in this area, and so it's a lot harder in terms of accessing information and really creating that kind of collective approach. So not really best practice, but just 2 different examples, and really where we're seeing, how we're seeing collective action really turbocharged in one place versus another.
Thank you, Maeve. It's good to hear those 2 stories. We'll go to Nikita, but for the last questions, you'll be able to answer first. So no one will mow the grass before your feet, as they say in the Netherlands. Well, I would like now to give the floor to the younger generation, and for that, I would like to ask Nikita the following questions. I will have 2 questions for you. The first one is, how do you experience the water challenges of today?
Yes, thank you, Sophie. Well, for me, when I think about water, I think about very positive memories. Swimming in the lake near my grandpa's house, or going to the beach with my friends. But for me, these memories now coexist with concern. I've recently read that people below 40 We'll experience much more climate and water-related disasters. We will experience 3 times as many floodings, 7 times as many heat waves. And those are the predictions with the current climate pledges in place. So being 22 years old, I am scared of what these predictions mean for me. And even more, I fear the predictions that research has found for my 2-year-old nephew. So these concerns and fears I have to deal with on a daily basis. And I think they will become reality, unfortunately, when, among others, companies don't take the responsibility for water management.
Thank you, Nikita. It's every time awakening up when I hear those kind of worries from the younger generation. And now going a bit more into the future, I mean more into the working your professional career, or how I say, but what kind of strategies do you think companies or institutional investors should choose for the next 20 years?
Yeah, well, I think the focus of companies should shift from limiting negative externalities, such as reducing the amount of freshwater use, to actually the creation of positive impact. They should set ambitious goals that reflect the urgencies of the issues we have today. And as most of us already mentioned, I think collaboration is very important with peers, with local communities, NGOs. And yeah, there are, of course, very great efforts already from companies which are here today as well. But I think it should become more mainstream.
Thank you, Nikita. Very good to hear that. What I would like to do now is to go to my last question, which I will ask to Maeve. Because of sake of time, yeah, maybe the other speakers, you could say, if you think she missed out on something, you can add up.
Okay.
So we can leave a bit of time to for the audience, for the questions coming in from the audience.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Maeve, the last question is actually related to what research institutes like Deltares, where I'm working, but also NGOs or universities, is related to what they could do to support the private sector in dealing with water in those different contexts. This question is related to data and the needed knowledge. Well, when you look currently, and even more in the future, with the new regulations coming from the European Union, for instance, there's a growing information need for companies to report on their operational risks internally, or to report ESGs for external sustainability reporting for their shareholders or regulators, also to inform their consumers. But also how, like Jan Willem said before, to measure impact of measures that are taken by companies or by collective actions. So where do you think the most pressing data or information gap is for companies or investors?
Sure. Before I start, can I, Nikita, thank you very much for that. And just to let you know that we also, I mean, me as an individual, but my company as well, also see the urgency and the need for change at the pace. You know, we're really pushing for change at an accelerated pace, and are totally with you on this. So hopefully you'll see some new commitments coming out of the COP26. But really, yeah, we're totally on board with this. In terms of data gaps, I think there's a couple of different things where we need to do more. I think first is in terms of mobilizing change at a faster pace. I think there's a need for sharing of river basin data, so that, I mean, for instance, we're going through the Alliance for Water Stewardship, applying the standard, and the level of investigation is quite, you know, is in depth that we need to do. And I just think to remove the barriers for engagement on this subject, I think open sourcing this data would be very valuable, and so and help to create more of an understanding about the issues in the area. So I think that's one area or one opportunity, and then the other is, a little bit about like referring back to the volumetric water accounting. But I think there's a massive opportunity for us to talk about and measure additional co-benefits. So for instance, how water security can be a driver for addressing climate targets and vice versa, or how improved water management can also be can also deliver biodiversity or human health benefits. So I think that could then unlock additional action for people that wouldn't necessarily engage in water as like a specific subject. Over to my colleagues, if you would like to add something.
Vetri, Hans, or Jan Willem, any of you want to add up?
I'd like to add.
Patrick?
I think, So I think again, thanks, Nikita, for all the thing, and I can tell you personally, I've experienced them as growing up with no water or flooding. That's my personal experience, and I think it's important. It's just so obvious everybody's kind of getting into it, but I think Maeve talked a lot about data availability. I think the whole biggest opportunity is collective action, right? We all talk about collective action, but the governance is more important. How does research organizations like yourself or other NGOs there's a lot of really large statistics saying, hey, by 2030, that's the percent water. But how can the smaller organization like research can say a tactical goals, right? What should be a collective basin goal in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5? Because you are collecting those information from people like Nikita and other people, so it kind of have that close connection with people and really putting in some sort of a strategy to say, here is how you can progress. Maybe there are 4 companies we could sign up for a potential goal in the particular basin that could mitigate those type of risk. All of us have our own ways of doing things, but that's where I think the NGOs and the research community can really drive a bigger impact, because you have the ability to collect the data, you have the visibility for the data, and you also work with all these companies. Where for us, we got to establish the collaboration workaround, but some sort of a tactical approach. What should companies do by 2023, 2024, 2025 to improve that basin level risk reduction, right? We all know this 2030 is a great goal, but what should we do tomorrow, right? That's today and tomorrow. I think that's what I would probably request is how would you bring all these tools and create a shared goal that could be measured, at the same time governed. Governance is critical because we have change in people, change in thing, but the risk of water is not going to change. It doesn't look at people or government. It's continuing to get increased, but how could the governance structure be put in place?
Thank you, Vetri. Jan Willem, you want to add?
Yeah, very short, because we are also looking at time. Nikita, I think I can only echo your comments 100%, and very good that you as a young generation holds up the stick and go for it. Especially you now have a little bit of the front running companies here in this, but actually it's about the rest that needs to come, especially where the water is not as visible. And that's why I think it's so important that we realize that everything we use every day and eat, there's so much, let me say, water in it that we just don't see. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we need to manage it very carefully. And the only thing that I want to say here is that although there are so many things we can do to address water scarcity, etc., I think there's still not enough attention for treatment of wastewater. There's so much wastewater, human wastewater, that goes back into nature completely untreated, and especially in an area where there's already water stress, and you also have that wastewater treatment wastewater not being treated, is really something that needs to be changed. And I hope that water management and regulations, but also following up on that, is becoming much more stricter than it is nowadays.
Thank you, Willem. Hans, anything to add or?
Yes, thank you, Nikita, for your comments. I heard your concern, and I think the tricky thing is how to translate this concern into actions. And I think everyone can take actions. We talked about value of water. It's a change in mindset, and we have this change in mindset in companies, but also in individuals. And if also young people and old people, why not old people, can change this mindset and turn it into action in the daily life, in the choice of products, in the choice of areas where they want to spend their holidays, there is a huge potential for that. And I think this might give hope, because in nature, you know, you only have to stop to destroy it and it will come back. There is a potential to regeneration. And when we talk about data and water stewardship, I think there is a strong need for facilitation into in water basins, because it makes no sense that every company has its own vision for the water basin. One will go there, one will go there. We have Vitri talked about the common goal. And I think there is really a need for communication and facilitation inside a water basin to find this common goal. And this common goal will include, and then with Jan Wilhelm, more and more the water quality, and not also, and CDP is going from that. They will, the new questionnaire, we see that water quality will be a strong topic. And what is missing also is harmonized indicators. Our companies to benchmark, and to have competition also to be the best in water saving or to be in water stewardship. It would be good to have harmonized methodologies and harmonized indicators for footprinting, for water stewardship, so we can measure progress, and we can say this water basin, there we have generated progress. But from my point of view, today we are not there. There are pieces of the puzzle, but what does it bring, and how can we bring this methodology together and the indicators in line so that we measure our common progress? That's for me.
Thank you, Hans. We had a bit of a worry that we would not have time for questions from the audience. I think that's going to be the case. Hans, is there one question that we could still answer?
Well, there are three questions in the Q&A, and two are related. And well, maybe that the panelists can shortly comment on one of them. And that is from Koen van Iwaarden. He states that oftentimes water challenges are related to challenges in local water governments. And it seems to him that this is a difficult area for private international companies to get involved in. How do the speakers deal with that?
Oh, I could probably go. I think just from our experience, and I think I talked a little bit about an emotional-based discussion. I think that's the challenge, right? I think there's a lot of emotions when you have public-private sectors and stuff. I think in one terms of we've seen a good method is the water loop methodology that allowed us to use more a science-based discussion, because there is a clear KPI. What is the outcome after your meetings? So that's allowed us to work with certain public sectors, and for example, in South Africa, we're able to really engage with the government, work collectively with them to bring that stakeholder, right? But there's still opportunity. I think there's still opportunity, because change in government, change in people, and like we talked about, governance is a critical thing. But I think that's where I would say the opportunity lies, right? It's a clear-cut definition of what success looks like. Not on a long-term horizon, but in immediate terms, right? Okay, if I do something today, what is that I'm going to expect or see as success in next year? So when you start to see progress and it's a neutral and not connected, you'll probably make good. Hoping so. I think it'll be a good public-private partnership, right? That's where it's required to solve the problem.
Yeah, Vetri, thank you. I think we're getting to the end of the session. I'll try to answer those other questions after the session. I still have access to the platform. Well, just to finish up, in this session we heard different stories on how companies are dealing with water scarcity risks, whether it's at the factory level, specific geographic areas, upstream and or downstream in the supply chains. So I'm not talking about the river basin, but the supply chain. And context is very important when looking at the data or the indicators used. I hope these stories inspired other companies that were participating in this session in taking steps to reduce risks, but also increase opportunities, as Nikita was talking about. It's not only thinking about risk, but also really thinking about how you can drive positive impact. I also hope it gave some insight in data knowledge that is need to be informed, whether you're a consumer of product, a shareholder, a regulator, or a worried citizen. Thank you to the speakers for sharing the stories, and also, yeah, of course, thank you to the audience for your participation and listening to the stories. I hope you will have a nice Amsterdam International Water Week if you're considering attending other sessions. And with that, I would like to say goodbye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Do you want us to stay on, Sophie?
Yeah, maybe, but I think there's still people online.
Okay.
So let's wait up. I'm not sure how it works, whether it's closed or...
You?
I still think there are people in the session if I look at the number.
But sometimes people dial into things and then and then walk
And
away.
do some other things.
Maybe Nipur can kick them off.
No, I think I would let people be in here to mix and meet and match with each other if they want.
Okay.
So yeah, we always leave the session a little bit longer.
Oh, right, that's nice.
Sophie, I sent you some questions in the Q&A board, but I thought that you were busy with the thing, so I sent them to Hans.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, understood. But if you all want to leave, you can please feel free to leave. That's not a problem.
I suggest to do that for me as well. Well, at least for me, because
I will send you all follow-up email.
Okay.
Okay. Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
everyone. Thank
I
you.
will leave
Bye-bye.
also. Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
And good luck.
Ik bel je wel even, Hans.
Ja, dat lijkt me beter. Dat is prima. Ja, is goed.
Oké.
Dan zie je.
Bye.
Bye.